Craig Allen. How are you doing?
I'm doing well. How are you doing, Sean?
I'm doing well. Um, so I've had the pleasure of playing with you quite a bit
Yeah,
over the years,
likewise.
and and like just trying to go back to like when we met. We met because I applied for a position at Vineyard Columbus,
Yeah,
and and the stars aligned, and it set up a 5.5 year um, uh, stint where I was working at Vineyard Columbus as a creative director,
hmm
and um, you were my boss,
yeah.
and I still maintain that uh, maybe the best boss I ever had.
Oh, good to
Uh,
hear.
yeah,
Yeah,
because it was you're very encouraging, um, and very open to different kinds of ideas and things, and we did a lot of um, big services,
yeah,
and I've told you this before, but you know um, that was a real highlight for me, that period of time, being able to work with you,
yeah.
and
Good.
and to be able to create music at the level that we did in a sacred house was particularly fulfilling. Um, so I have you to thank for that. Yeah.
Well, yeah, Sean, it was just a real privilege to work with you, and yeah, it was a great 5.5 years, and I'm just thankful we're still able to make some music together. Yeah, as after that fact, you've been back to Vineyard Columbus and have just been a blessing for our congregation, and been able to hang out with you down at the Ohio State University and come be in your studio and watch you interact with your students. And yeah, I'm very thankful for those 5.5 years, and I'm just super thankful that our friendship and relationship has continued. Super thankful for that.
Yeah, I mean, sometimes these kinds of scenarios don't end that way, which is unfortunate.
Sure.
Um, but I also am very glad that we remain friends, and of course, I there was there was nothing there was no big shakes or anything. It was
Yeah.
just it was just time to do something else,
Yeah.
and I felt supported in that. You were supportive, and the church was supportive. So
Yeah.
great.
It's good.
And I'm also it's wonderful that I'm able to come back every once in a while, and in particular, I was thinking about how I how I might be, uh, as far as like my headspace, if I
Mhm.
didn't have uh, um, the playing outlet that you set up and asked me to come and play bass for some of the recorded services at
Sure.
Vineyard Columbus
Yeah.
over this during this quarantine.
Yeah. Yeah. This has been an interesting season for not just for Vineyard Columbus, but just for our culture. And how do we navigate this time of quarantine and shelter in place? And it's been particularly challenging for a lot of professions, but certainly particularly challenging for musicians. And I've got some friends I've been in conversation with over these last 2.5, nearly 3 months, and it's particularly challenging for musicians just this in this time, at least in the town where we are, Columbus, Ohio. This is a good time for musicians to be making music and being compensated for that as we're in early spring, summertime, and that's just not happening for folks now. So um, it's and I know that's particularly challenging for church musicians as well. As Vineyard Columbus, we're doing exclusively online services now. We're not meeting in person as the church. So um, there's some times when we need to reach out to folks that we've got relationship with and see if they're willing to come in and be a part of the bands that we put together for our online services. And just glad to have you be one of those musicians we can reach out to and have you come in and you play obviously many instruments. So there's many places we can plug you in, and we're super thankful for that. And I know you've been a blessing just in relationship with folks in our community at Vineyard Columbus. So to keep those relationships going is a blessing, even in these kind of odd times we find ourselves. So yeah, it's good to have you, Sean. Always good to make music with you in whatever setting we're doing that. So thanks for coming in and doing that with us. And we'll see you in a couple of weeks too, doing that again.
That's right. And keep those calls coming, because I'm
yeah,
keep saying
exactly.
yes.
Exactly. Yeah.
My planner's pretty open.
Yeah, I'm sure it is. I'm sure it is. Yeah, I know.
So, can you talk a little bit about, some challenges with like reformatting the service and like trying to, follow the rules and also trying to be good stewards and trying not to put people in harm's way and all of the sort of competing sort of interests and trying to do that well.
Yeah. Well, and I think at the front end of this, mid-March, I think, what was it, March 16, 15, somewhere around there, where Ohio and specifically, Columbus decided to do this shelter in place. And I think for us as a church, on the front end of it, we were actually, but the governor was saying we could still meet in person as a church, but our church leadership, I'm very thankful for our church leadership to decide to not meet in person. And I don't remember which weekend it was. I believe it was probably that March 21, 22 weekend or something. But so, we had to quickly shift to an online service. We had planned on live streaming our services, probably late summer, early fall of 2020. But this obviously fast tracked that, and we've got a tremendous production team on our staff, and we've got a tremendous weekend team that just quickly went into high gear to implement an online service. So we streamed that service live, and then we had to shift a little bit more to doing pre-recorded services. We did that probably mid-April, somewhere around there. We decided to do that, and we had to reformat the length of our services in order to retain folks engaged in the service. We've had a 90-minute service. We're now currently doing under an hour service for our online experience. So there's been a lot of things that we've had to shift and refocus what we're trying to do with our services at Vineyard Columbus, specifically over the area that I oversee, which is worship arts. So but as I said, we've just got a tremendous production team that I'm a part of in terms of worship arts. We collaborate with that team a lot, and the weekend team that I'm a part of too. So just with all these talented folks we have in our church, people have just been doing a tremendous job with pulling together excellence in what we do. You've heard me say this many times, but what I'm encouraging people to do in terms of worship arts ministry, we're pursuing 3 areas of excellence. We're pursuing spiritual excellence, we're pursuing musical excellence, and we're pursuing relational excellence. So with all those that I've mentioned before, the production arts team, worship arts staff and team and volunteers, I have been just thoroughly grateful for what we've been able to do to pull off, and not just pull off, but to do well. an online service and provide an experience for folks, because we're just not meeting in person, and we want to provide a place that people can have an online experience of worship and be a blessing for folks. So it's been a journey, and it's been a lot of adjustments along the way, but I do feel that what in the area that I'm in with worship arts, we've done just a tremendous job with providing that experience for our church, and it's certainly not just worship arts ministry. There's a lot of folks that work behind the scenes that are just tremendously talented and creative and problem solve like you wouldn't believe, and it's just been a real blessing. So yeah, that's kind of been our journey over the last 2.5, 3 months at Vineyard Columbus for online services. So
Yeah, so I'm working at Second Baptist Church now,
mhm,
the ministry of music there,
yeah,
and we've been doing live services, um,
yeah,
and so our service in the past was, let's see, started at 10:45 and was going until 1:15.
oh, okay,
So it was
yeah,
a lengthy service. Now it
sure,
was only the one service,
uh-huh,
but it was pretty long, and we cut that service down to an hour and 15 minutes,
yeah, hmm,
um, because I think trying to do the online thing, you don't have some of the physical in proximity sort of um, you know devices or whatever that you can sort of like lean on.
right,
Um, and not that those things are filler at all, but it's just there's not really a virtual replacement for those things.
sure,
Um, and that's something I have in my teaching at Ohio State, like we for what was it, 5 weeks, so we had an extended um, spring break, so we did 2 weeks for spring break, and then I think it was like 5 weeks of classes, and I still feel like 5 weeks was too long with
yeah,
the new format, because when you're just interacting through the screen, it's it's very, as far as like having conversation, especially in applied lessons. A lot of one of my lessons is playing. We're playing, right? It's conversational.
sure,
There's a dialogue that's going on, and so the sort of clunky trying to go back and forth, and okay, now you get your sound source together, okay, share your screen audio and do this, and then okay, now you do that, for okay, now it's time for me to do that, and
yeah,
after a while that starts to kind of suck the life out of
sure,
um, something. Now that's not to say that it can't be done, but I think it would take more planning, and I have actually a lot of experience teaching online lessons, but that's not the way that I uh, deliver the content to, obviously, my students at Ohio State,
right,
because the proximity thing, right?
sure,
So the first thing I did was I cut my lessons down. They were initially there were 55 minutes, and I said, okay, well, I know that 55 minutes is just not doesn't make a lot of sense to
yeah,
try to do that.
yeah,
So I cut them down to 30 minutes,
okay,
and um, I'm saying that to say that there seems to be a parallel between that and the length of church services, right?
sure,
Trying to shorten them because we realize that there's certain things you can't do, at least not effectively. And so
yeah,
you lean on the things that you can do well in that medium, and
right,
then you try to shorten it so that it's more
right,
palatable.
yeah, exactly, and I think we're what we talk a lot about, and I think you're alluding to as well, is just engagement. People staying engaged with the content,
Right,
and
right.
um, I've been in lessons on the receiving end of lessons, and have given lessons myself, and I know there's a lot of give and take in that context. There's a lot of creativity in that context. It's and I think the trying to relate to a screen sometimes, having I'm not given online lessons, but I think that would definitely hinder some of that creativity, that give and take that you have when you're in the room, like you said, proximity with the person, giving lessons. And I think that's true just with our online church experience. You know, we want to keep people engaged. We want to keep people engaged with the content. We don't want them just to spectate. We want them to participate. So
Right.
we found that just reducing the time that we're asking them to be engaged with that content, that I think there's higher engagement the time that they're there. You know, when we were talking attention span and those kind of things clearly here, but also just that way of relaying what we want to relay, what we want to express through worship, what we want to express through the preaching. Um, it just needs to be honed down and fine tuned so people can receive it. And there's distraction they have when they're at home. There's distractions when they're watching the service or engaging in the service. So if we limit the time that they're online engaged in the service, I think the engagement is going to be deeper for them as well. And I think that's what you're saying too with lessons. The
It's
content is
interesting.
deeper.
Yeah, you brought up a point. The distractions at home.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, exactly. Yeah,
Um, you
yeah,
know, 5 weeks of meetings and classes with students, applied lessons, one-on-one stuff, faculty meetings,
right.
and town hall, meetings. All of this stuff on the computer, and people forget that, especially folks that have kids and they have other stuff that's going on.
Right.
It's like, okay, now how am I going to organize and coordinate that? And often people don't really have the same kind of space in their house to
Right.
be able to,
Right.
to do the stuff that they can do from their office,
Yeah.
right? Or when they actually come to church, that's a place, that space is a, there's different kinds of things that are happening there, and so you can kind of leave home at home, you
Exactly.
can leave other stuff away.
Yeah.
And yeah, so it's another reason why it's important to try to minimize how long you're asking people to stay, dialed in.
Right. Right.
Yeah.
Yeah. There isn't that separation. I'm sure you've heard this language of in our culture now, there's a third place. People talk about a third place. You have your home, you have your work, and then there's a place that you may engage in community or hang out with folks. That third place could be the local coffee shop, or,
Right.
for you, I bet that third place is the gym,
Hi. That's right. And I went today. They opened it
Yeah,
back up. I was
yeah.
safe. I
You
did
were
what
there,
what they told me to do.
right?
You know,
I'll
but
bet
I was
that's
there.
right. So I think that's that idea of third place. The we don't have that now. There's a lot of our third. Thankfully, you're able to get to your third place. But if those are opening up now as we speak. But for nearly 2 months now, we haven't had that third place. We haven't even had the second place. We've all been in our homes, and so there's not that separation from what we do in our home life to what we do in our work life, or what we do when we're expressing our faith. It's
Right.
all been in our home. So there are benefits to that. I think there's blessings in that, but there's also distractions. So I think,
Less gas money.
yeah, well, yeah, it's true. Yeah, that's right. That's true. But I think that's just something we have to think of. I know you're thinking about it when you're in what you do at OSU, and we're having to think about that in what we're doing in local churches, and being a bright spot in people's life, in what we find ourselves in now, and still providing what we believe the church can provide, but we've got to be realistic about it. We can't ask people to be engaged in a longer period of time. So we've just realized that bringing it down to about an hour is a pretty good length of time, and we've seen the metrics on the engagements of that. That's been really good. So Yeah.
All right. So you talked a little bit about teaching.
Sure.
You said that you teach lessons. I mean, you've received lessons
Yes.
and you've taught lessons.
Yes.
Um, and so, can you talk about your teaching
Sure.
and maybe how your teaching sort of affects your musicianship, your playing, your ability to um, I mean, you're the leader. I mean, you're the MD in services at
Sure.
Vineyard Columbus.
Sure.
About how that sort of cultivation of teaching skills is instrumental in providing direction and clarity, for what's supposed to happen during rehearsal and that kind of stuff.
Sure. Sure. Well, I think, with before I came on staff at our church, I was doing a lot of similar things to what you're doing. I wasn't at a local university, but I was teaching private lessons. On average, had about 55, 60 students a week, private lessons. Was gigging in Columbus, doing recording sessions, doing arranging, writing songs for folks, and all kinds of things I was involved in. And with the private lessons, I had a wide range of students, beginner students that were young, 4 and 5, and I would have adult students. I had a lot of middle school and high school age students. Some of my beginner students were adults as well. They were wanting to learn to play piano, and but my guiding principle, or just what I was always trying to keep in the forefront of my mind as I was giving lessons, and it was about 25 years I did that before I came on staff at our church. And one of the things I always try to keep in mind is, yes, I'm teaching piano, but I'm teaching people music through the instrument that they've chosen, piano. It's my primary instrument. I play other instruments, but it's my primary instrument, and that was always my guiding principle. I wanted to expand people's understanding of music. I wanted to just grow their appreciation for music and all kinds of music. There's certainly the repertoire that you would cover as a piano instructor, and you want to make sure that people hit what they need to hit in terms of the piano repertoire. But there was a lot that I let the interest of the student kind of guide the content we had in our lessons. So, but always keeping in the forefront of my mind, I want to make sure that they're learning music and they're understanding music through the instrument that they've chosen. So I think with that in mind, when I was giving lessons, I've carried that over into an aspect of my job at Vineyard, which is helping people have a deepening understanding of music and what we're doing in terms of preparing for our services, preparing for the rehearsals, obviously helping our leaders, who were pretty much a volunteer-driven church, helping our leaders know how to communicate to musicians, them being musicians themselves, helping them to understand and grow in their understanding of music, music theory specifically. So with that, that's kind of a holdover from what I did in lessons. Like, I want people to have a growing understanding of music so that we can be in communication with each other. And my role specifically, being able to communicate to our volunteer musicians that have a variety of experiences. Some of them have, they'll have their bachelor's or their master's in music. Some of them are self-taught. Some of them had private lessons with a local person in their neighborhood. So there's just a variety of backgrounds that we have. So we have to have some form of common language in order to get done what we need to get done every weekend. So that's been an influence on what I've been trying to do in our worship arts community, is just develop that common language so that it's not the only language. It's not the only way to communicate it, but there is some general principles that guide that so that we can all be speaking that language and understand each other. So, and we're just trying to raise that level of understanding so that if we play some music that's maybe a little more complicated, um, then that challenges some of our musicians so that they can grow in their musicianship too. So just I think that's been one of the main holdovers from private lessons for me as a person who gave lessons is I want people's understanding of music to deepen and grow, and also their appreciation for other musical styles too. That we obviously all have our musical styles that we kind of lean towards or we appreciate, or that's the way the style of music they came out of, or that's what they enjoy playing. But what we try to do is have a pretty broad and a broad palette of musical styles that we pick from in our church, because we have a very diverse congregation, and we want to make sure that we're providing an experience that people can relate to in terms of musical expression. So again, just that deepening of music, understanding of music, and that deepening of appreciation for broader music styles. I think that's definitely a holdover from my time of giving lessons.
So let's go back to the beginning.
Sure.
So can you talk about how you grew up, and maybe some of the music that you heard around the house, maybe other things that were going on around the house that had an impact on maybe decisions that you made, and things that maybe you gravitated towards.
Yeah. Yeah, certainly. Well, I think, whenever I'm asked this question or think about these kind of things, I'm the only musician in our family. I'm the youngest of four. My folks aren't musicians. There's an appreciation for music with my parents and also with my siblings. But my sister is probably where I first just felt engaged with music, because she's 9 years older than I am. And I remember being, as a young kid, the way our house was positioned, the basement steps sat right under where the piano was. And my sister is a very good pianist, and she's not been one that's ever wanted to perform. She does it for her own enjoyment, and it's therapeutic for her. So that was even true when she was a young person. She was, adolescent when she started lessons, and maybe a little younger. I'm not real sure, but she was just a very gifted piano player. And I used to, if she knew you were listening, anyone were listening in the home, then she would stop playing. She just didn't like to be, come close to at all performing in any way. So when she was practicing, there had to be other things going on in the home, so you couldn't sit in the room and listen to her, because she just wouldn't play. So I would sneak and listen to her. I would sit on the basement steps, and those steps were right under where the piano was in the house. So, because they just kind of went underneath that part of the house. And I just would sit there and listen to her play. And then whenever she was done, I'd quickly get out of the basement, go over to the piano, and try to figure out what she was doing. And that's a very early musical memory for me, is listening to her play and trying to pick out what she was trying to play when she was done. But I couldn't sit there and watch her, because she wouldn't. I couldn't sit on the bench next to her, couldn't sit in the couch, on the couch in the same room with her. I had to be listening in, and she didn't know I was listening. So that really tuned my ear, because I couldn't watch her hands. I had to really listen to what she was doing. I'd run over and try to play. So that's a very early musical memory for me. That's with my sister. And then I have two older brothers who are a big musical influence on me too, because they had, my oldest brother's 10 years older than me, and my other brother's 5 years older than me. So there's, quite a bit big age disparity there in terms of just how old they were from me, and just their musical influences. They had a pretty eclectic influence. My both of them had a big appreciation for jazz. That's my first exposure to jazz. They loved Herbie Hancock. They loved Chick Corea. They loved Miles Davis. I remember my brother giving me an album for my birthday when I had probably just started piano lessons, and it was Joshua Rifkin's recordings of Scott Joplin rags. And you got to remember, this is the early 1970s when ragtime was having that rebirth, via the movie The Sting and various other things that were happening in the culture at that time. So that was an album that my oldest brother had given me for my birthday, and then that same year, probably Christmas or some other occasion, then he gave me, I'm just saying this to show you the broad range of musical taste he had. So there's that he gave me. Then he gave me a Joni Mitchell's album called Mingus, which was her tribute to Charles Mingus. And, I'm probably 13, 14 when he gave me that, and that just blew my mind. That album's just phenomenal. I took a deep dive on Joni Mitchell because of that. So, but yeah, just both brothers just had a very broad range of musical appreciation that was definitely passed on to me. My father's not a trained musician by any stretch, but he loves to sing, sang in a lot of choirs as he was growing up. He's got a good baritone voice. So, and he played a lot of music in the home. His era is big band. I mean, that's when he grew up. He's a big fan of Glenn Miller. He's a big fan of Count Basie. He's a big fan of Duke Ellington. So his musical language that he resonates with is big band music, and that was played a lot in our homes too. So there was just a wide variety of music that was expressed in our home that I definitely absorbed. So that's just kind of the musical current I was in growing up.
So how about like some early teachers and maybe some mentor figures, some folks that kind of helped to steer you in a particular direction?
Sure. So I mean, I started lessons when I was older than most kids are. I mean, I was teaching myself, sneaking and listening to my sister play and those kind of things. And I was teaching myself for a while, but I started lessons when I was 11, which is a little later than most kids would start with piano lessons. But and I took from Mrs. O'Donnell, who was the lady down the street, most people's story, the lady in the neighborhood that gave piano lessons. So I took from her for maybe a year or two, I can't remember. And then God bless her, she told my folks, she said, I think I've taught him all I can teach him. You need to find him another teacher. And she could have just, my folks didn't know. She could have just, taught me for years and years. But she realized that I needed to move on to somebody else. So then I went to the preparatory division at Capital University, which is in a town here in the Ohio area called Bexley. So Capital's in the Bexley area, and that was, I think there was a friend of the family that knew somebody that took lessons there or something. So I went to the preparatory division at Capital, which is preparing you, as you know, preparing you to study music at a university level. And I took from Mrs. Beatrice Eisinghausen there from middle school all the way through high school. And she was tremendous. And as I mentioned earlier, just the repertoire that you study as someone who's studying piano, she was just tremendous at that. Knew what I needed to get through, knew the literature I needed to study to prepare at the university level. If I wasn't even sure I was going to do that when I started lessons with her, but that's where she was pointing all of her students. So I got all I needed from her and more. So she's tremendous. I studied with her all through high school, and she prepared me for auditions that I had to endure to get into Capitol too. So,
Mhm.
and then when I got to Capitol, had the privilege of studying with Hank Marr, and just what a blessing he was. He was the only 4 years he was at Capitol were the same 4 years that I was at Capitol. So I felt very fortunate to be under his guidance, and just a kind man and a very gifted musician, and just felt very blessed to be under his mentorship. And then I also continued to study classical when I was at Capitol as well, under Verena Dombrons. She was my teacher there. Um, so those are some of the piano teachers I had, but there was another individual that I was heavily influenced by at Capitol. He was at Capitol when I was there, and his name is Von Weister, and just a tremendous musician, and um, had a great influence on me and most of the folks that, if not all the folks that were at Capitol the years that I was there too. So yeah, those are some of the standouts in my mind in terms of mentors and teachers that I've had that have been a big influence on me.
Now, I heard that you played basketball.
Yeah, yes, that's true. My dad's a basketball coach, so what what was going on in my life growing up, it was piano and it was basketball. That was, I played basketball through high school. I wasn't good enough to play at Capitol, so I just played in murals at Capitol. But yeah, so basketball was a big part of my life growing up. My dad being a coach, and went to many summer basketball camps with him each summer, and yeah, that's a big part of my growing up years. We had a regulation half court in our backyard growing up, and my backyard was the hang when I was growing up. All the folks came over to our yard, and we had many games on that court. So yeah, that's a big part of my growing up too, is basketball for sure. I get a lot of the discipline, that you're aware of clearly in what you're doing, that's required in in taking music seriously. So that the athletics that I was involved in, because we had to also, if we didn't play a fall sport in high school, we had to run cross country. So I ran cross country in order to even try out for basketball in high school. So you had to have some kind of fall sport. So distance running, in addition to playing basketball, and those athletics I was involved in, definitely influenced my outlook on how to approach studying music and the discipline required for that. Yeah,
Yeah, yeah. I find there to be a direct relationship.
sure.
I use a lot of weightlifting, bodybuilding kind of analogies in my studio with my students, because um, often it makes it easier to understand things that are sort of seem to be more directly accessible and less and seem less abstract.
Right.
Like picking up a weight and moving a weight seems like physical, and it seems real
Yeah.
in a sense that waiting for a certain result to happen in your playing as a result of repetition, that
Right.
seems to be more abstract, and it takes long enough that it's hard to remember, or
Yeah.
to quantify the process.
Yeah. Yeah.
And
Definitely.
so um, okay, so can you talk a little bit about so like what did you do after college?
So as I was at Capitol, my last couple years at Capitol, I got very much involved in the Columbus music scene, and built a lot of relationships with folks that were um, studying in the various universities, OSU, Otterbein, Capitol, Ohio Dominican, but also folks that were weren't studying in the undergrad level, but were just making a living in Columbus as musicians. So I did develop a lot of relationships with folks that were doing that very thing in Columbus. So my last couple years was gigging a lot and studying a lot at Capitol, and that continued when I graduated. I just made my living as a musician in Columbus. I did go on the road a little bit toward the Midwest with some top 40 bands. I did that, but my home base has always been Columbus, and did that until probably around 88, 89, somewhere around there. And then met my wife, and we got married, and started having children. And I realized I wanted to be home for the kids that we were having, and the life that I had prior to that wasn't really conducive to that. So I had to make some adjustments. So I took on some more students, took on more lessons, which I love doing anyway, and still played in the clubs in Columbus, but I didn't do it as much. Then I shifted to doing a lot more private parties and things like that. But still was kind of in that current of musicians in Columbus that were doing a little bit of both, playing in the clubs, but also doing some private parties. So I would say from the time I graduated Capitol until probably mid 90s, early 90s, it was, playing in the clubs, doing private parties, and teaching. But then as we started having children, I started teaching more, took on more and more students, and was not gigging as regularly because I was trying to be home more often. So that was the shift that happened when I got married and started having children. But I would say for about 7 or 8 years post my time at Capitol, it was exclusively working as a musician in the Columbus area, occasionally taking some road gigs and doing that too. But that's what my late 80s, early 90s life was like. So,
and okay, so what led you, like, what maybe series of events sort of led you to doing what you're doing right now? I'm skipping a lot of stuff that's I'm sure, that sort of led you to do what you're doing now at Vineyard Columbus.
Sure. Well, I think that's a pretty involved story, so I'll try to condense it as much as I can. But in my time of teaching, giving lessons, I was meeting a number of families that, where they were, the local church they were attending was Vineyard Columbus. And I didn't really have any expression of faith at that point. So through relationship with them, and finding out where they go to church and finding some commonality with certain families that I was engaged with, because I was teaching some of their children, I was teaching some of the adults in the families, various relationships through music. It just became attractive to me, to my wife, to look into what this thing called Vineyard Columbus was. So went there, and started getting involved in worship ministry, started volunteering. Vineyard Columbus is very heavily driven by volunteers. That's part of one of our values, that one of the values we express. So I started serving in worship ministry, and did that for, it was probably a good 15 years maybe. Still, teaching, still gigging in Columbus, and but then volunteering at the church that I called my church home and our family's church home. And what I frequently say is, you hang around long enough at a church and you serve in ministry long enough, they start putting you in charge of things. So I became a leader in a lot of areas, was helping the leaders that were on staff with what they're doing in ministry, and through various changes in our ministry structure, they asked, our church leadership asked me to step come on staff as our interim worship arts pastor in 2010, and mainly just to help this transition that we were experiencing in our worship arts leadership. And then after about 8 or 9 months, they asked me to stay on permanently. So my wife and I definitely prayed through that and talked through that and decided this is what I need to be doing. So I've been our worship arts pastor at Vineyard Columbus since 2010, and it all started with just getting plugged into community with what was going on at Vineyard Columbus, and sensing a calling into that area of ministry, and being a very much involved volunteer in our ministry, and it all just kind of sprang from that.
Yeah, that's the 15 years of volunteering.
Yeah.
I think
that seems right. Let me. Yeah, that's probably right, because I started 90. That seems right. 95 to. It was about 15 years. Yeah, it was certainly that.
That's 15 years more than most
yeah.
most musicians would do.
Yeah. Right.
And I think that it says a lot about you as a person. Something else that was a big deal, a huge deal, when I was at Vineyard Columbus, was my son was born.
Yes, that's right.
Moses.
Yeah.
And you all, led by Noel Shearer, through a baby shower for us.
Yes, we did.
And another reason why you're stuck with me, even when I transitioned to another church, is because you and your wife are godparents to my son.
Absolutely, and privileged to be that. Yes, absolutely.
I was thinking about who I wanted to be as God's parents.
Yeah.
And just the kind of people that you all are, and the kind of the impact that you've had on my life. I mean, that yeah. Trying not to be too overly sentimental, but it was really a really a critical time in my life.
Yeah.
The time was there, so anyhow, I'm saying that that's like a has been a huge connecting thing between us. And when I think of musicians, I mean great musicians, folks that can really play, there seems to be not as many that there's not that many musicians that play at your level that have your disposition. They're the kind of person that you are. Often the musicianship, that life, that whole thing, the drive associated with that, it sort of it diminishes balance.
Sure.
Like, there's not you're a very balanced you're a very balanced guy, and also I have to say, you're also the hardiest person that I know. Like, when's the last time you were sick? Like what?
I can't remember. Very thankful.
35, 40 years ago?
Yeah.
Whatever it was. It was a long time ago, right?
Yeah, that's right. Yeah.
And I was talking to you about that, and you told me one of your tricks.
Uh-huh.
And I've told a lot of people this, because
good.
It's like, this is great. This is good stuff, man.
Yeah.
One of your tricks is even if it felt like you were just on the edge of a little tickle,
Yeah, yeah.
You go crazy, hog wild on the vitamin C.
Absolutely, exactly right. And yeah, that's something that I read. As you know, I'm a reader, so quite a while ago, probably late '80s, early '90s, I was doing a deep dive on Linus Pauling, and that was one of his big
Mm,
recommendations is the immune building that vitamin C does for your
yeah,
system. So I do a
yeah,
pretty regular maintenance dose,
yeah.
but also if I feel the slightest bit of you know cold coming on or a little scratch in the throat, I up my intake of vitamin C, and not it's usually the pharmaceutical grade ascorbic acid, not like tablets you buy at a local grocery store, which has some other
Oh
preservative
yeah,
stuff mixed in. It's pure ascorbic acid, so which
I
is
see.
just vitamin C is all it is. But that way, when you up your intake, it's all water soluble. So what you don't need, you get rid of, and if you need it, you use it. So that definitely is a big immune system builder, and that is something I learned from Linus Pauling. So
Yeah, I started doing that, really increasing significantly my daily dose, and then
sure,
whenever I felt like I was starting to get sick, and
sure.
that's really, you know, I've still been sick a couple times, but but it's significantly reduced it. I
Yeah,
mean, and I
yeah,
have, my son, he's 6, uh,
sure,
and and my wife, she's a teacher at elementary school,
sure.
and so there's a
And
lot
a
of
gifted
like,
dancer, I might add, a gifted dancer and choreographer. Yes.
oh yeah, oh yeah, yeah. I interviewed her on this,
Yeah, I
on this.
saw it. I
Yeah,
watched it, of course.
yeah. She is freakishly creative,
Yes, absolutely.
uh,
Definitely.
incredibly creative,
Yeah,
like unfathom, unfathomably.
yes, definitely.
So, you
Yeah.
know, I think I told this story during her interview that about when we got married
Mhm.
and the wedding reception, and she just like she's just telling me these like what seemed to me to be totally random, unrelated things that she needed,
Right,
right?
right.
And my job was just to go acquire those things, right?
Right.
So I'm telling you, it seemed like twigs and berries, and this is stuff that I don't even know what the stuff was.
Yeah.
But I brought all the stuff to her, um, and I kid you not, it's like a um, it's like a Jesus dividing the loaves and the
Yeah.
fishes
Right. Right.
story, where all of a sudden
Yeah. Just
there's this.
just beauty comes, right?
I was like, what?
Yeah.
that
Just
that's
yeah.
what that was.
You made that out of this? Exactly. Yeah.
Or it's like one of those things when like an artist is painting something upside down and you
Sure.
can't see what it is, and then they
Sure.
flip it upside and oh
Yeah.
wow,
Yeah.
that's what it was.
Exactly.
It's like
Yeah.
one of those things.
Yeah.
But
Well, very gifted. Very gifted. Just blessed to have been able to work with her too. Yeah. She's a blessing.
one of the things that I've always enjoyed doing with you is those offertory selections that we've done
Yeah.
at the venue.
Those are great. I mean, it's I like it because it's very simple. You have a musician of your caliber come into to our church, and we've done a number of pieces, a variety of styles, and as you know, at Vineyard Columbus, we don't we don't have as a regular part of our services, performance pieces, but when when we do and we have a musician of your caliber come in, it really just it moves people. It takes people to another place that to an experience that we don't regularly have as part of our services, and it's just a real blessing for people. And it's most of the time when we've done things, It's been instrumental music, and it's, we've had the occasional thing where we've got a vocalist with us as well, but most of the time, I just done some instrumental pieces, and I think it's a testament to what just instrumental music, no lyric, no voice involved, can really do to speak to people and take them to a peaceful place or an inspirational place. So yeah, those have been a blessing, and we get tremendous response from those times when you've come in, and even when you were on staff and we did a number of them, and then you just graciously agreed to keep doing some of those for us periodically. It's been a blessing for me personally, but it's just been a real blessing for our church too. Yeah, thank you for that.
Well, you keep asking me, and I'll keep saying yes.
Yeah, exactly right. That's right.
So, I mean, I always have such a great time when I'm at Vineyard Columbus.
Yeah.
Such a great time and so many great memories.
Yeah.
So my son has gotten to the point now where, okay, so there's this application for kids that is connected through the Facebook Messenger.
Okay.
Mm-hmm. Okay, so your parents have to give you permission to do X, Y, and Z, and it's very very controlled.
Sure.
And we gave him access to my pictures on Facebook and Lori's pictures.
Okay.
And it's amazing, like the stuff that he finds.
Okay.
He just, and it's like a laser beam. He just goes right to it. It's like, but there's a bunch of pictures, of course, of him when he was really little, at Vineyard.
Yeah.
And videos and things, and he's just cracking up and stuff, and oh yeah, you say, Daddy Old Church. I'm gonna go back to Daddy Old Church, and so it's and it just brings back a lot of great memories.
Yeah.
A really formative time in my life.
Yeah,
So,
that's good. That's good. I'm just super thankful for those times too, Sean, and just looking forward that we can have some more formidable times too.
oh, absolutely.
Got a birthday coming up too, doesn't he? August, right?
That's right. August 7th.
Yeah.
But your birthday's before that.
Well, of course, yeah. My birthday's July.
And something, I have to tell people, so I have to tell folks, you share the same birth date with someone else that I interviewed on this
Okay.
program, and that's my dad.
Oh, that's right. I didn't know that. That's right. Yeah, I forgot about that.
That's right, July 2nd.
Yeah, tremendous.
Yeah.
That's interesting too, because Moses' birthday is my mother-in-law's birthday too, August 7th. So there's some relationship there too. Well, I forgot that I shared your father's birthday. That's an honor there. That's great. How was your dad?
My dad is doing great. My dad has been retired longer than I've worked at Ohio State.
Okay.
And I think he started his retirement with just being totally comfortable with that, and I'm just going to do whatever I want to do and do it how I want to do it, and so he's still doing the same thing.
Good.
And he I tell people this pretty regularly, because except for during this quarantine, I'm a 5 days a week gym attender.
Sure.
And I remember, because it hasn't always been 5 days. It's sometimes it's been 3 days, sometimes 4 days or whatever.
Yeah.
And so for the last pretty good period of time, a few years or whatever, it's been 5 days. And I remember telling my dad that, I don't know, I probably told him it 8 years ago or something.
Sure.
I can't remember.
Yeah.
And he said, yeah, that's pretty good. I go 6 days. Like, all right, you got it. You got it.
You got me.
You got it, man. It's like,
Yeah, that's great. That's great.
so
Yeah, that's really good. Tell your dad I said hello, would you, for me?
I definitely will. I
Yeah,
definitely will.
yeah. It's great.
So, is there anything, Craig, so um, goals and like stuff that you're working out, maybe some things that you're, um, I don't know, this we're in this quarantine, where it's more time by ourselves and kind of um, in our thoughts and things. I'm sure that there's probably things that you're working out, thinking about, goals maybe that you have for the future, or projects that you're engaged in,
Right,
or are waiting to kind of continue.
right. Yeah. Well, I think um, for me, it's been. I think we've all noticed this too, as we're, in our musician circles, be it even though it's in a virtual experience, but I think we've all seen a lot of our peers and our folks that we admire and have relationship with even. There's just been a lot of expression of music online. There's been a lot of things that people are doing in their homes, which I found very inspiring, because there's clearly not a creative outlet for folks uh, in live music situations at all levels, at um, the local level, or regional, or national touring, and recording artists. There's just no expression for that. So there's been a lot of expression via social media or other outlets that I saw, kind of coming to the foreground early on in this current season we're in. Um, so for me, what I've been wanting to do, I did a few of these things on social media that I'm involved in. Posted some things that I've done at home. So that's been one thing I've been trying to do, just cultivate even more of a creative life than I had before, because I've just had more margin in my life to do that. So I am writing a lot more music now, which has been
Mm.
really good. Um, I'm involved in some projects that some of my friends are doing. You remember, just some of the musicians at church, or some folks that are doing some recording projects at our church that I'm involved in, and playing on their projects. So I haven't done a lot of that because my schedule didn't really permit that to be in the studio as much. So I've been doing that. Um, so those are more personal goals. I'm hoping that through this some of the creative things I'm involved in, that I'll be able to have an outlet for that too, even if it is just on some social media that I'm involved in. I think goals for what we're doing at Vineyard Columbus is just continuing to provide uh, a expression of worship that people can be engaged in for our church community, and trying to bring excellence to that, and bring a faith expression that people can engage with there, and doing that better. As I said earlier in our conversation, we had to change our whole focus of what we do at Vineyard Columbus from a worship arts perspective. So that has taken a lot of time to kind of get some rhythms in place and some workflow in place. So that was, took a great deal of March into April to get that settled in. So I feel like we've got some systems in place and some workflow in place that I'm happy with, and we can then, maybe look towards, not just we're looking towards fine tuning what we're already doing. So that's some of the goals that I have for what I'm doing at Vineyard Columbus. So, and then really just for me, personally, I'm just hoping to come out of this a better person than when I went into it. That's one of my overarching goals. Is this is a challenging time for a lot of folks, and it's true for me as well. I'm hoping that I will be a kinder person, a more loving person, a more supportive person, a more patient person, just a better person coming out of this time that we're currently in than when I went into it. So that's the overarching goal that I have, and through God's grace, I'll be able to do that.
Yeah, you know the you're all of those things that you just said, those qualities you want to improve in. Um, I don't know anyone that I consider to be. Uh, it, it's a high standard. You, you're you're a very good person. Put it that way.
Well,
And
thank
I know that, but I also know that the way that you become a good person is that you're working on it and you're aware of the things that you're not that good at or whatever, or
you.
things that you feel like there's still space
Sure,
to improve in, and you're
absolutely.
honest about it, and then you work on it.
Right, absolutely. Yeah, and it's it's through God's grace that he brings you into situations that when you're talking with him and you say these are areas that I want to improve in, um, he brings you into situations that you have the choice to
That force
make
you to get that together.
exactly right. Force you to get your act together. That's right. So he said, "You want this? All right, let's see how
Oh,
you do." So that's yeah, very true. Very true.
yeah.
Yeah, but thank you for the compliment, Sean. It means a lot coming from you because I have a lot of respect for you, and it means a lot when you say that about me. So thank
Oh man, it's just facts, man, just the facts.
you.
Uh, hey, so one thing I did want to ask you is about practicing. Now you talked
Good.
about writing music, and you talked about trying to be more creative.
Sure.
Um, what does a practice routine look like for you these days?
Well, I mean, there's an element of what I've always involved in my practice time, back to when I first really started taking my lessons seriously. There was a season of life where um, you know that I spent about 5 hours a day that I was practicing, and this is middle school, high school years when it really just settled into me like this is something that I love to do, and I want to do it as best I can. So um, that carried into my years at Capitol as well. Just to keep up and just to maintain, that was the level, the time of needed to I needed to spend to practice. So it was minimal 5 hours a day when I was at Capitol. Certainly more than that most days, but I don't do that now because I don't have that time.
Right.
I would love to get back to that point and have had seasons of that as I've been a father and a husband. Um, but there are elements of that, uh, my practice time when it was longer that I still carry through. Whether it's certainly keeping up with my scales, going through all 12 keys,
Mm-hmm.
playing all 7 modes and all 12 keys, and doing that to 2 octaves, maybe 4 octaves on the keyboard. Learning tunes, that's a big part of my practice time. I think that's a
Yeah.
huge thing with practicing. Um, and then the other thing that's is important is just which scales obviously do for you too, but there's a lot of literature for pianists. Hanon exercises. I do those a lot as well. Czerny exercises. So that's still part of my practice routine. Um, working through scales, working through exercises like Hanon exercises, and learning tunes.
Mm-hmm.
Um, so those three elements are definitely a part of my practice routine.
Yeah, I mean this is all great stuff. Of course you know this. As you get older and you have more responsibility, family and everything else, then
Right.
you're not going to have 5 hours to practice,
Yeah,
right?
yeah,
You
yeah.
know, and no one has unlimited time.
Right.
You know,
Exactly.
it's actually I try to get my students to raise their hand when I ask, all right, now who in here has unlimited time? And
Yeah.
I raise my hand first. Say, hey, you know, anybody else? Who
Yeah.
else? Come on,
Yeah. Exactly.
somebody tell me who's got. You know, of course,
Yeah.
obviously, no one has unlimited time. So the idea is, you know, you got to be real precise about what it is that you're going to be practicing,
Sure.
intentional, focused, you know, all of that discipline stuff that you were talking about, that sort of the athletics
Sure.
helped with
Yeah.
developing. I mean, it's all right there.
Yeah.
Um, you know, you hear stories about certain artists practicing 12 hours, 13 hours a
Oh
day,
yeah.
and that kind of thing.
Yeah.
In the interview with Antonio,
Sure.
one thing that he mentioned was, you know, when he was practicing that much, when he was playing that much every day, he mentioned that, well, how much of that was like really focused, and how
Right.
much of it was. And the thing is that all of that matters, because at a certain point in your life, you're still sort of developing infrastructure,
Right.
and you need that time to sort of teach your DNA what is expected of your body, you
Right.
know.
Right.
um, and then, you know, you get to a certain point when it's like, okay, well, I can still improve as long as I get an hour and a half, or as long as I get an hour, or whatever it is, if I play these particular things. Hopefully over the course of our lives, from doing a lot of practicing for a long time,
Right.
we get better at it. We get more efficient. We figure out more about ourselves. Music is a great way to, you know, that age old, you know, challenging, you know, thing about knowing thyself,
Yes.
which
Yeah. Exactly.
practicing can help us to know ourselves.
Exactly. Yeah. I think I watched that Antonio interview, and just how he was talking about, you know, he had his horn with him, and he may have been practicing a number of things, but you know, time spent with the horn too, you know,
Right.
where it may not be that he wasn't in this, you know, high intense 12 hours a day, but he was spending time with his horn. So and that rung true, you know, definitely rung true with me, because when when I first heard about what Oscar Peterson's practice regimen was, it was first, I don't remember the numbers, but it was a certain number of hours a day, a certain, and he would do that a certain number of days a week for so many years. And then he said he started gigging, and he never had that practice schedule again. He'd had that regimen for whatever length of time it was. And it was, you know, like 8 hours a day, 7 days a week for 10 years or whatever it was. I don't remember the exact numbers,
Right.
but when I first heard about that um, in a Downbeat mag, and it it just stuck with me as a young kid, and like, well, you know, if 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 that's what it takes, and that's what I need to dive into and try to
Right.
have something that can work for me. So you know, it's what Malcolm Gladwell refers to as our 10,000 hours. You know,
Yeah.
where
Yeah.
we
Yep.
spend time developing, like you said, your familiarity with whatever your craft or your art is. There's certain things that just become, you know, the warp and woof of who you are, and
Yep.
I think that time spent with your instrument, like Antonio mentioned, is really just, it's something that's the building blocks for ourselves as we move into adulthood. And I hopefully I would like to get back to that time frame, or that, you know, time when I'm spending that much with my instrument. I think that hopefully will happen, but until then, I'm going to do what I can.
Well, your daughters are all grown now, so
Yes, they are. So
so
I don't. I've got more time, but we are having a grandchild soon. So
that's right.
come July, we'll be grandparents. So we're excited about that.
Yeah, but Craig, you can give those back though.
Yeah, that's right. We could spoil them and give them back, which is my plan. Yeah.
Is there anything else that you wanted to say, Craig?
Um, No, I don't think so. I've just really enjoyed these conversations that you've had with folks. I've watched a number of them. There's some others that I still want to catch, and I'm just thankful that you've had this content for folks to engage with, and the conversation have been very inspiring for me. And when you reached out to me and said you'd like to have some conversation, I just was really honored that you'd ask, and just feel very privileged to be a part of what you're doing here. I think it's been a real blessing for folks, and I've found that the conversation's very stimulating and inspiring, and just thankful I'm able to be here with you too.
Well, I've only had folks on that I admire and respect,
Well, that's good to hear.
and and
Good. Thank you.
that, of course, and absolutely is true for you, man. You're a great musician and a great friend.
Yeah. Thank you, Sean. And that same thing to you. I'm very thankful for our friendship. Very thankful that we have the relationship that we do. And yeah, bless you. Thank you.
I love you, man.
Love you too, dude.
All right, I'll see you.
All right. See you.
All right.